Good evening. Good evening. It's great to see each and every one of you out this evening. I'm Vernon Hurt. I'm the director of the Center for Student Diversity here at the college, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to our annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. commemoration program here at the college. We're very excited to have you here, and we're looking forward to a wonderful evening with our special guest, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Just wanted to share some special thanks before we get started with our program. Thanks goes to Bob Knowlton, Rich Thompson, Jeff Herrick, Casey Van Veen, Robert DeSantis, and the entire Sadler Center staff for their support. Megan Sharon in University Relations, as well as Aaron Zagurski, Steve Tewksbury from Special Events. We thank Mary Schilling and the Cohen Career Center for providing a space this afternoon for an interview with Dr. Dyson. We also thank WHRO and the Daily Press for their support of this event. We're very excited to have each and every one of you here today. It is my pleasure to welcome to the stage Ms. Ashley Halpern. She is a joint law and public policy student here at the college, and she will be introducing our keynote speaker for the evening.
Good evening, everyone. I am honored to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Hailed as one of the nation's most inspiring African Americans, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson has been credited with revitalizing the role of the public intellectual with fervor of an ordained Baptist minister. Infusing intellectual thought with popular culture, Dr. Dyson focuses on topics of interest to the public. He eloquently melds scholarly insight with the phenomena of contemporary culture, emphasizing their interconnectedness and force that's shaping our society. He's a popular lecturer and professor. I'm sure many of you are familiar with his works. Dr. Dyson bridges the gaps between generations, connecting civil rights identity to hip-hop culture while forging links between older and younger Americans, especially Black Americans. As a cutting-edge historian, he educates the general public on the significance of hip-hop, not only in understanding Black culture, but American culture as well. With a powerful voice, Dr. Dyson reaches beyond race, addressing universal commonality of our American concern. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Eric Dyson.
Thank Ms. Halpern for that very gracious introduction, and thank Dr. Hurt for this wonderful opportunity to come here to William and Mary and to have this opportunity to chat with you a bit about the grand and great legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Of course, this is one of the signal institutions of higher education in the nation, and it's always an honor to come to Virginia, especially given what y'all have given to the world recently in terms of concentration upon complicated notions of statehood. And with the 150th anniversary of the Civil War quickly approaching, it is interesting and intriguing to be in Virginia. And so I'm honored to be here and to have the opportunity in the birthplace, if you will, of the conceptual articulation of democratic notions vis-a-vis Mr. Jefferson and others, to have this occasion to come to a university that, at least in its name, tried to establish equity between the genders. That's a good thing. But tonight, then, I want to reflect briefly and leave time for questions and answers and discussions and poems and philosophies. I want to talk about Martin Luther King Jr., tradition, transformation, and triumph. And I want to shout out my friend James Green, who drove here with me. Well, okay, he drove. I did the right thing. But he's a good man and an intellectual compatriot, and he keeps me awake, and I try to do the same for him. But I want to thank him for being here tonight. When I think about Martin Luther King Jr., I think about arguably the greatest American to ever live. That's a controversial statement. I'm sure that those who especially are in the embrace of a narrow conception of democracy and even more narrow vision of patriotism would scoff at this and suggest that I was myself delusional. Martin Luther King Jr. was not a president like Abraham Lincoln or Thomas Jefferson. And that, I think, is one of the great marks of his destiny, that despite being a private citizen, he occupied such an esteemed place in the annals of American democracy because he seized the authority from those who ostensibly and allegedly possessed it and put democracy to work for those who were most vulnerable and voiceless. And so, arguably, the greatest American who lived, despite his flaws and faults, people have now taken to besmirching Dr. King's character and suggesting he wasn't a perfect man. None are. Let he who is without sin even pick up a pebble. It's striking to me that, especially when the sins of Dr. King are discussed vis-a-vis his appreciation for the flesh or his wanton disregard for copyright, the reality is that he lived in an era when it was legally sanctioned, or at least not legally enforced, that women of color could be raped without moral compunction or legal redress. And many were taking advantage of the vulnerable legal and social position of black women. In fact, here in Virginia, a great man who was the architect of the Declaration of Independence himself, I need not remind you, engaged in the delightful frolic of a 14-year-old girl. It did not begin with R. Kelly. That's you. And so Martin Luther King Jr. wrestled consequentially with the fundamental issue of America still today, because it encapsulated every other issue we've dealt with. You say, no, but terror is so real and big. Yeah, but it didn't start with Muslim brothers and sisters who were extremists, who were outraged at the infernal possibilities of American democracy and resented the rise of the American empire, or in the embrace of evil. American terror is homegrown. This form of terror that was not under the sign of Islam, it was under the sign of the cross. A distorted one, a twisted one, a burning cross. And so Martin Luther King Jr. dealt with the fundamental issue that has traumatized the American collective imagination. And that's why we try to get away from it. And I understand it's too hard. We don't want to be pointing no fingers. Can we get over it? That's why we thought when we elected Obama, this would be done. Two for the price of one. Have a get out of jail free card on the game of racial monopoly. We figured we'd elect a guy and we'd be done with blackness. And here blackness is just rising up again. Most notably, not in Mr. Obama himself. And I'll explain that later. I ain't saying he ain't really black. That's not what I'm saying. And so Martin Luther King Jr. calls us to recognize the fundamental issues of a tradition of which we can be proud. Here we are in Virginia. Notes on Virginia articulated by Mr. Jefferson and Monticello. Declaration of Independence, he put it forth. He didn't think it needed any kind of editing. They said, we got to edit a little bit of it. Back and forth they went. This great genius, this grandiose figure, this grandiloquent expression of American aspiration. Here we are with a great and grand tradition. Those traditions continue to inspire us, but they also must call attention to the limitations of those traditions. Martin Luther King Jr. came from a tradition that was matched to that democratic tradition of Lincoln and Jefferson. That noble tradition of Kelsey and Mays. Obscured to the larger world because they lacked a fundamental curiosity about black America because they didn't believe these people were fundamentally human to begin with. And certainly had nothing to offer the world besides their muscularity, their supremacy on the field. Nothing notable in their minds. Even Mr. Jefferson, in his notes on Virginia, was skeptical about the potential of the Negro to embody rational scrutiny. So King came from that tradition, 15 years old. He was known as Tweed because he had sharp suits. He didn't start off, he wasn't born Martin Luther King Jr. He was born Martin. Actually, his name was Michael until he was 5 years old. Then his father, being inspired by Martin Luther, Daddy was Mike too, changed their names to Martin. How consequential this little name change. The black folk in their names do something significant, whether it's Mike to Martin or Shaniqua. Say, what Shaniqua mean? Whatever Shaniqua wanted to mean. Flexible nomenclature. So, King is Tweed because he has sharp suits. And he and his boy are part of a group they call the Wrecking Crew. And when they asked him, why do you call yourself the Wrecking Crew? Because we wreck all the ladies. I mean, you thought Big Pun started? I'm not a player. I just crush a lot. King had an eye for the ladies and for threads. That's what my generation called night suits. I know y'all call it different things. And so King graduates at 19, C student, but he begins to mature and accepts his call to ministry. He sees you can be smart and intelligent and a preacher at the same time. He accepts his call to ministry, preaches his first sermon, goes off to seminary, 19 years old, graduates 3 years later, goes off to get a PhD in philosophical theology, compares the theologies of Paul Tillich and Henry Nelson Wyman, and then gets called to a Baptist church in Montgomery, Alabama. And there at 26 years old, not yet having finished his PhD dissertation, the social movement erupts because it doesn't take its time and it doesn't make it convenient for you.